In this video, we will be looking at how to achieve protein needs via plant-based sources. When I was interning at Sharp a few years ago, I was tasked to give presentations about plant-based diets. The most common question that I received when I gave this presentation was, well, how am I supposed to get protein when I'm only eating plants? Don't I only get protein from animal sources? Well, the answer to that is no. We can achieve protein needs from plant-based sources. However, we need to understand that there's some things that we need to keep in mind if we are only eating plant-based sources in order to achieve protein, or even if we're mostly eating plants and maybe eating some meat-based sources for achieving protein needs. When it comes to proteins, I want you to think of a brick wall. The brick wall itself is the protein, but in order for the brick wall to be in place, it needs to be made up of individual bricks. These bricks we can think of are like our amino acids. The amino acids are the building blocks of protein. Protein is one of the macronutrients that our body requires in larger amounts. So macro meaning large, we need more carbohydrates, fats, protein, and water in order for our bodies to function, compared to micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals. We only require small quantities of those in order for our bodies to maintain themselves. Protein is a little different from carbohydrates and fats in a couple ways. One of those is what it's made up of. So for all three, protein, carbohydrates, and fats, they're all made up of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. However, protein's special in that it also is made up of nitrogen. Protein's also a little different compared to carbohydrates and fats in that it doesn't make up the body's energy needs as much. It helps a little bit when it comes to energy needs in our bodies, but it plays a much lesser role compared to carbohydrates and fats when it comes to that particular need for our body for energy. However, proteins are extremely important for a wide variety of processes within our bodies. So for instance, our hormones, they are made up of proteins. When it comes to our immune systems, proteins play a significant role when it comes to our immunity. Proteins themselves, so proteins that are for hormones, proteins that are enzymes, they all are going to be similar in that they're structured into 4 different layers. However, the structure itself is going to be different from protein to protein, and that's going to dictate the actual function that it has within the body. So for instance, let's say we're talking about insulin and leptin. Insulin is important for blood glucose control, and leptin helps to control our body weight. Both of these are hormones. However, although they both have similar functions in that they're both hormones, they're going to be different structurally. They're going to have different amino acids, those amino acid profiles, that are going to dictate the function that those two particular hormones have. There's 21 different amino acids within our proteins, and each protein is going to have different amino acids. Some of them are going to have longer chains of amino acids, and there's going to be more variety in the types of amino acids. Some of them are going to have shorter chains and less variety as far as amino acids are concerned. We classify amino acids based on whether or not our body is able to produce those amino acids naturally. So first we have our essential or indispensable amino acids. These are ones that our bodies cannot produce on their own. So because of that, we need to acquire these particular amino acids from our food. Whereas non-essential amino acids or dispensable amino acids, These are ones that our bodies are naturally able to produce on their own. So these ones, although obviously we can find these in our foods, we don't need to get these from our foods. Our body's able to synthesize these on their own. Conditional amino acids, this is, you can think of as a subset of non-essential amino acids. For most people, these are going to be non-essential amino acids. However, in cases of illness or stress to the body, these then might become conditional for a person. So for someone that has PKU, for instance, which is a nutrition-related disorder, these people have a mutation in the enzyme phenylalanine, phenylalanine hydroxylase, which normally adds an OH or an alcohol group to the amino acid phenylalanine in order to then create tyrosine, which we can see tyrosine here is a conditional amino acid. So for people who have the condition PKU, they need to acquire tyrosine from food because their bodies can't produce it on their own. So that's just one example of when an amino acid could be conditional. When it comes to where we get our protein from, there's considerations that we need to think of. That being complete versus incomplete sources of protein. When we say complete, we mean that within that protein source, all of those essential amino acids are present. And so we know that our body is going to be getting all of those essential amino acids that they need. Now, pretty much all meat-based sources are going to be complete. We don't have to worry about missing some amino acids when we eat meat-based sources, as opposed to most plant-based sources, with the exception of some such as tofu and quinoa. But for the most part, when it comes to plant-based sources, these are going to be incomplete, meaning that they might have most of the amino acids, the essential amino acids, but they don't have all of the amino acids that we need. So what do we do about that? That's where protein complementation comes in. This is where we mix and match different foods, if you will, in order to make sure that all of those amino acids are present within that one meal that you're having. So we can see here, I have these different columns based on the type of food that is going to be lacking in a particular amino acid. So we can see here that depending on the type of food, there's going to be a certain amino acid that that food does not provide. And then we can see what foods can be complemented in order to make that meal a complete source. So for instance, legumes and beans and grains, these two complement one another. So if we look at the meal idea, if we have meals that incorporate a grain and then either a legume or a bean, then that meal will be complete for you. So maybe it's making a burrito bowl or having a vegetarian burrito, or maybe it's having a bean soup with a bread roll on the side. It's up to you, and it might seem intimidating to do this, and it might seem like you'll run out of ideas quickly, but thanks to the internet, it can be helpful in order to help us find recipes that allow us to better complement our foods with one another. Here's a list of how much protein can be found in some plant-based sources and how many servings you would need to have in order to achieve that amount of protein. Below this video or above the video, I'm going to be putting a research study that I recently found. I think it was published a couple years ago, but it talks about the idea that when it comes to animal versus plant-based sources, our bodies, they are going to be more readily able to process the amino acids that come from animal-based sources. They did say, though, that in order to make up for not all of the protein being processed or bioavailable from plant-based sources, that if you eat a little bit more of those plant-based source foods, then you'll be able to achieve that protein need, or in other words, your body will be able to process those amino acids. So these are just some things to keep in mind when it comes to protein. To recap, it's definitely possible to achieve protein needs through plant-based sources. However, we just need to be cognizant of the fact that not all plant-based sources, in fact, most plant-based sources are not complete, in that we need to complement our foods in order to make sure that we are receiving all of the essential amino acids that we need in a particular meal.